bang! Just wanted to make sure I came back with a bang. Right, today's question is about, well, it reads this funky looking thing here. Get my pen on. Try and simplify it so that it's written in the form 2 to the power of a times 3 to the power of b. Personally, I don't think this would be used in a GCSE exam. It'd be a bit above the grade of a sort of GCSE student. But anyway, let's just jump straight into it. As usual, feel free to pause the video, have a go at it yourself. At the top it says, it just defines the factorial function, tells you a little bit about it. And factorial, it just means to multiply a number by all the numbers less than it. So 5 factorial just means to multiply by all the integers that are less than it. So 7 factorial, for example, 7 factorial would be 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 all the way down. And now what you'll notice is that what you can actually do is you can realize that 7 factorial, another way of writing it would be this, or perhaps even if I wanted it to. And the reason I'm showing you this is because you are going to need to use this in the answer to the problem. You could do it like that, 3 factorial. Remember, that just means 3 times 2 times 1. Alternatively, I could write it like this, 7 times 6 times 5. And there's lots of different choices. You could use 4 factorial, because remember that 4 factorial, all it's doing is it's multiplying by all the integers less than 4. So ultimately, we're just going to get back to 7 factorial. Right, so that's a quick little sort of detour, if you like. Now back to the original question. Let me just rub this off using my fancy little rubber. Right, so use a red pen this time. So what we'll do, we'll just deal with this first bit here first. We've got 7 factorial divided by 9 factorial minus 8 factorial. Now remember what we said about all of these factorials. 9 factorial, it's actually just going to be the same as 9 times 8 times 7 all the way down to times 1, and of course times by 1 doesn't make a big difference, so we could have just ignored that or not written that. But anyway, the important thing is to realize that each of these 3 things, 7 factorial, 8 factorial, and the 9 factorial, they contain a 7 factorial, don't they? Because the 9 factorial, I could have written it as, wow, 9 times 8 times 7 factorial, because 7 factorial is literally just that bit there. Similarly, the 8 factorial, I could write that as 8 times 7 factorial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace both of these. I'm going to replace the 9 factorial with 9 times 8 times 7 factorial. And I'm going to replace the 8 factorial with an 8 times by 7 factorial. The reason I'm going to do that is because then you'll see a bit of cancellation happening. What that's going to turn into, the 7 factorial over 9 factorial minus 8 factorial, it'll turn into 7 factorial divided by 9 times 8 times 7 factorial. Remember this bit here, that is just 9 factorial. Do this bit in red and take away 8 factorial, which is 8 times by 7 factorial. I'm just going to get rid of this bit. What this can now be simplified to is 7 factorial can remain at the top. At the bottom, I'm going to have a 7 factorial there, so I'll factorize it if you like. 7 factorial, I'll factorize that out. I've got 9 times 8 still remaining there, which is 72. And I've got a minus 8 there. And what that simplifies to is 7 factorial over 7 factorial times by 64. 72 take away is 64. And you notice that there's a cancellation here, and you're left with 1 over 64. And if you're smart, you'll realize that that is just, of course, 1 over 8 squared. Right, I'm just going to get rid of that. So we boiled this bit down to 1 over 8 squared. And if you notice, just turn this into a nasty 2. Turn that into a nice 2. Right, 1 over 8 squared. If you notice that 8 is exactly the same as that 8. These two 8s are exactly the same. What I mean by that is, whatever that number there is, it's always going to be at the bottom. So for this one, if I was to do this here, you've guessed it, if I was to simplify it using this method here that I've shown you, you'd get 1 over 6 squared. You can go ahead and try that, prove that yourself if you want to, but you can take me at my word. The last thing then is now just going to sort of put all this information together, hopefully neaten it up a little bit. You've seen hopefully how I've done it. So what we've ultimately ended up with is 1 over 8 squared times by 1 over 6 squared times by 1 over 4 squared times by 1 over 2 squared. Okay, and at this point I'm going to write this as let's write it like this, shall we? 1 over 2 cubed squared times by 1 over 2 times 3 squared. At GCSE you write that as times rather than a dot, but after GCSE you usually just write it as a times. It's called a scalar product. It means exactly the same thing. Anyway, the next bit, 1 over 2 times 2, 1 over 2 squared, because 2 squared is 4, times by, and then we'll just leave that as 1 over 2 squared. I'll get rid of this. Change it to red, because I like red. Now, I'm going to write this as 1 over, I'm going to write it as a power of 2, 1 over 2 to the 6. Remember, you multiply the powers. Here, I've got 1 over 2 squared times by 3 squared. I've got 1 over 2 to the 4, and I've got 1 over 2 squared. Hopefully all of this is making sense. Now at this point I'm just going to try and collect everything up. Since I'm multiplying, I can just add up all of the powers, and I get, I'll change it to blue. Blue's nice. I get 1 over, because 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. Here I'm just going to add the powers of the 2. I get 2 to the power of 6, add 2, add 4, add 2 is, what is that? 6 add 2, it's 14. And the 3, well, there's just 3 squared. And I'm going to try and put it into this format here. That's going to be 2 to the power of minus 14 times by 3 to the power of minus 2, because remember it's at the bottom of the fraction, therefore it's going to be negative index. And so we're pretty much done. A and B. A is minus 14, B is minus 2, therefore the final answer is minus 16, because minus 14 add minus 2 is indeed minus 16, and we are done. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Catch you in the next one. Bye bye.